All right, everybody, we're going to be working on a 4-part mini tutorial all about Forza tuning that goes right along with the article that we put together. So hopefully you'll be able to follow along, understand what we're doing. And first of all, what we need to do is we need to pick a donor car. So based on our article, we want to go ahead and we want to buy the E46 M3. This is going to be our test car. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to select it from the list. Once we get down to it here, there's the Z4, getting down to the other M3s, we're looking specifically for the E46. Here we go, 2005 BMW E46 M3, base PI, performance index of 507. The car weighs about 3,400 pounds, 50-50 weight distribution, 333 horsepower, and 262 pound-feet of torque, according to Forza. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to buy the car the way it is. We're going to take it in the default gray that it comes in, or silver. We're going to buy it with stock parts fitted. We want to be able to choose our own upgrades like we talked about in the article, and we'll step through this. But what we want to do first is we're going to go over to tuning and upgrades, and we're going to go into the tune shop, and we're going to go ahead and save our baseline. That way we have it. We can always revert back to the base of the car. So we're just going to call this BMW, we'll call this E46 baseline, right? So I can always revert back to stock in case I needed it for any particular reason or any type of race. But let's also take a moment to test the car. Let's see how it drives by itself. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to set up the race. So we're going to do a race setup. Let's just take away all of the AI. That way we can have some nice clean laps. We're going to pick a test track like Road Atlanta just to put down a base time and see where the car sits. Road Atlanta's got a good combination of technical turns, some off-camber, some blind, and long straightaways so we can test that maximum speed to see if our upgrades are actually working. So let's go ahead and get started with that, and we'll put down some preliminary laps to see what the base 507 BMW M3 will do at Road Atlanta. So let's give it a minute here to load up. Arriving at Road Atlanta. All right. Now the first lap, we'll take it easy, get the tires warmed up. We'll actually pull up the telemetry and see what that looks like. I mentioned telemetry in the article. So here we go. Here's our digital dashboard. And it's going to be important to note some of the numbers here. Pay attention to when the torque starts to fall off. And we're going to need that later as we're tuning. Oh my God, the brakes are horrible. Look at this. All right, get back in there. Downshift. All right, let's see. Let's go back to our menu here. You can see the contact patch working in real time. Here's our spring dampers. Looks like they're pretty soft. G-forces. We're going to hit that wall. Yep, we sure are. Didn't need a G meter to tell me that we're going to hit that wall. All right. Tire pressures are pretty high. But again, this car is stock out of the box. Tire temps are climbing pretty quick. I'm not 100% sure what standard operating temperature on the tires should be, but as you can tell, they heat up pretty fast. Probably faster than even in real life. Because it takes a good part of a session to get a couple pounds of air in the tires. So I'm going to say once we cross start finish, we're approaching turn 10 here, that maybe we try to do an actual lap and see where this car is. Tires should be warmed up enough. We are on street tires. So let's drop the digital dash and just see what our lap times look like. Lift, tuck, and across the line at a 143. All right, so enough of that. We know what the car does stock, 143. It should be very easy to beat a 143 with proper upgrades. So why don't we go back out and take a look at what upgrades we can do to the car and what it changes with respect to weight, weight distribution, overall power, etc., etc. So let's go dive into the upgrade menu a little bit. So as I mentioned in the article, you always want to start from right to left. So you want to work backwards on this because you don't want to touch the power. Leave the power alone. Again, 330 horsepower isn't a ton by today's standards, but it's a lot for this car when we start taking away weight. So do I want to do some sort of engine swap? Probably not. Do I want to do a drivetrain swap? No, because it makes the car heavier. Do I want to do an aspiration conversion? I may want to look into a centrifugal supercharger. Let's look at that after we've done all the rest of our mods and see how much PI is left over. So anything that boosts power, which is a significant amount of power, an extra 50 horsepower here, we want to do after we've done all our suspension mods, reduce the weight, etc. So let's take a look at what else is available for this car before we start talking about adding additional horsepower. So we're going to go straight into the aero. We're going to want front and rear adjustable aero, which shows up here highlighted in blue, or cyan. So we're going to do the Forza Motorsports wings for both the front and the rear. That gives us adjustability for aero, which we'll talk about as we're doing the tuning. And we're going to go ahead and pick race tires. A lot of people swear by the sport tire. It's just as good, a little bit harder. You know, you're going to get some more grip. I'm a big fan of race compounds, but you can see that there's a huge PI jump, almost a 30 PI difference between the two of these. Oh, it's more like 20. But still, it's a big jump when you're trying to make up numbers along the way. You won't get the same kind of cornering grip that you would with the slicks. So we're going to go with slicks just to keep things equal. We're going to buy them for 10 grand. That jumps us already to 560. We've made 2 mods, aero and tires. We're at 560 from 507. So we're going to go in and we are going to grab the racing clutch. We don't really need it. We're going to go with the sport transmission to start. So that way we can only tune the final drive and we're not going to deal with individual gearing. We're going to go ahead and get the lighter drive shaft to shed some weight. And we're going to go with the adjustable differential, which changes the PI 0 in this case. Now, working backwards again, we always want bigger brakes so we can tune them. Now we're at 573. We're going to go with the racing springs and dampers or shock absorbers. We're going to pick the adjustable sway bars. Notice we're still climbing. We're going to go, did I pick both sway bars? Let me double check here. Nope, we didn't. Let's get the rears as well. And let's go ahead and cage the car. Yeah, it's gonna add weight, but it's almost a good thing because it will help us with our PI adjustment. We could leave it out and save the 150 pounds, but they say that it does change the chassis stiffness and rigidity according to the calculations that are being made. I don't know how much of it is true, but maybe it's a placebo effect like we talked about in the article, but for 2 grand, it's monopoly money, so why not? Now, here's the big one, reducing the weight of the car. If you notice, just jumping up to sport weight reduction brings us to A604. We don't want to jump out of B class, so we're gonna be stuck here with an 84-pound reduction, so negating half the weight, or thereabouts, of the roll cage itself. So now we have 15 PI left to play with, okay? Not a whole heck of a lot. It means our supercharger's probably out altogether. So let's do our aspiration conversion here. Centrifugal supercharger brings us to A613. So what else can we do to this car to gain some easy horsepower or get our number as close to 600 as possible? Well, as I mentioned, you can pretty much ignore most of the stuff at the beginning. Exhaust is kind of pointless. Let's start looking at the valve train. A610. Maybe we can go with the sport valves, and that'll jump us to 593. We can't go. We could go all the way up for an additional 15 horsepower with the race valves, which is, as you notice, is also changing our red line. It's moving it up. That's also moving our torque and horsepower numbers up as well. So we're going to go ahead and grab that. It's going to bring us to 598. We're going to do a freebie and go with the flywheel. And it's 2 less pounds in the car for $800. So we're at a total weight of 3397. Let's double check a couple things here. We're going to save this and see what we did to ourselves, right? So we came down about 100 pounds. No, not even. We've come down a whopping total of, 18 pounds. It's not really that much. We haven't saved that much in terms of weight, and we've only come up 15 horsepower. So our speed number has actually gone down. Our handling has gone up. Our acceleration has basically stayed the same, and our braking is better than it was before. So just throwing on mods a lot of the times doesn't make that big of a difference. It's not really that helpful. So what could we do here to make this M3 better? Well, let's go back into our upgrades and see what we can change. Well, we know for a fact that the car is technically lighter without the roll cage. But we want the adjustability in the suspension, so we're going to leave all that stuff alone. So let's put it back to stock weight, right? But now we're at A605 because our power number has gone up. So now it's this game of what do we add and what do we take away. So now we need to go back to, because our power to weight ratio is changing. So now we need to go back and take a look at, let's say, our valves. And drop down A601, B592 when we get back down to the stock valve output. So this isn't, well, I want the higher rev. So let's take away the flywheel, right? So now we're at B600 on the nose. So what do we think means more at the end of the day? Go back into Setup Manager. Do a load. Oops. I want to do a save. My apologies, because then we can compare it to the other car real quick. So we've gained, I don't know, less than 10 horsepower here, but we've also saved 200 pounds or thereabouts, right? Let's just round to make it easy. Our speed decrease isn't nearly as severe as it was before. Our handling is still better. Our acceleration is about the same, and our braking is better. So let's work within these confines, a little more horsepower, slightly lighter, and now we can adjust the transmission, change acceleration, change handling, and all that. But let's start with just looking at how much the car has improved the way it is. So we know our lap time before was a 143. We should be able to do better than that with just mods and no tuning alone. So we're going to do E46 base plus mods, right? So we're going to save it as that. That way we just have that. We're at B600. Let's get back up to Road Atlanta and see what this car does before we talk about advanced tuning in the next part of the videos. All right, so we're back here for part 2. We are looking at our newly modified E46 M3. No tuning whatsoever. All we've done is made some tasteful modifications via the upgrades menu. We have set ourselves up for tuning to make this car really perform the way we want it to. This car, unfortunately, doesn't have a very large gap in terms of what we can do to it, like if we had started with a C-Class car or maybe a D-Class car and brought it up to B. The same is true when you're looking at some of the other cars that are out there. You need to kind of play this game of what's the best car for the class I'm building towards. Yeah, I love the BMW E46, but is it really the right choice for the race I'm going into? So let's go ahead and get started. We know, well, we can do this in race, and that's fine too. All right, cold tires. Got 24 cars out here, and we'll try to stay out of traffic. Squeeze in there a little bit. First lap, we got to get the tires warmed up anyway. Now, the other thing to remember is that when you've done these upgrades, like changing the shocks and springs, the spring rates are different than those of stock. So it's almost like buying a set of iBox or Conies or Bilsteins off the shelf and putting them on the car. It's suddenly lower and it's suddenly stiffer without having done anything. But does that mean my alignment is correct? Probably not. All right, let's get around these guys. I don't feel like the car's accelerating any harder than it did before. It's still a little long in fourth gear. Try not to hit him. Oh well, we did anyway. We're at the front of the pack now. We're going to have clean track in a second. Lift a little in 12. Look how much more the car is planted without doing a whole heck of a lot. Some of this could be the tires because we are running on slicks. Dive into the corner. Pull us through. See if we can get a clean lap out of this. Got bigger brakes so we can go in a little bit later. I still don't like how it pushes. You can hear it going into the corners. We really shouldn't be understeering on slicks. Oh, nice slide. Brake and tuck in. A little bit too far out. I would have liked to be closer to the apex, but that's okay. We're just looking to put down a clean lap and see how far off we are from the stock car. Look at that, 136. Just doing the mods alone, we have pulled back 6 seconds on this car without any additional tuning. So why don't we take a moment to kind of absorb that, and then let's talk more about how to tune this car and see if we can get even more time out of it. All right, part 3. This is where we get into the nitty-gritty on how the tuning system actually works. So we've picked our upgrades. We know we have adjustable suspension. That's what we're targeting. We want maximum grip. We want to be able to carry as much exit speed as possible when we're out on track, right? Go in deep, go in hard, you know, slow in, fast out. So it's not always about horsepower. It's really about carrying speed and carrying as much momentum through a corner as possible. But, you know, before we get started, why don't we go ahead and get our car all fixed up, right? Because now we're not stock anymore. And I might have taken a liberty or two. So this goes out to one of our members. Welcome, Freak Show. So this has a change of wheel package on it and a skin. Other than that, the mods are the same. Put their numbers on it, looking good. So welcome, Freak Show. So now we're going to talk about tuning Freak Show to get maximum potential out of the vehicle. All right, so let's go ahead and get back to the tuning shop. We're going to go ahead and tune the car. And let's double check to make sure that my wheel change didn't change our PI. Nope, we're still at 600, so we're good. Check that earlier just to make sure, but you know, you never want to make a change to wheels, especially because they make weight changes. Sometimes they look cool, but they will change your PI. So per the article I mentioned, you know, all the cars start at 30 regardless. Everything I've read and studied says that the optimal numbers are between 14 and 26 PSI. I like to start tuning at 27.5. That way I'm just slightly over the maximum of the sweet spot according to the internet, and then we work from there. So gearing wise, BMWs are notorious for having really, really long gears, and we know the car is very sluggish in fourth gear. So maybe we want to get a little bit more acceleration out of this car. I would recommend jumping to like a 383, which would be the equivalent to one of the other final drives available from BMW. I like to use real world gear ratios because then they better match up with the way Forza has programmed the details and the metadata about the car into the engine. So at least that way you kind of know, hey, well, this is differential from the convertible M3. I'm putting it in, you know, my coupe, and that's how I'm getting the power increase, you know, via the final drive change. And that's not really a power increase, it's a speed change. So what did that do for our effective top speed? Let's go back to 364. We were at a theoretical top speed of 168, right? And our 0 to 100 time was 11.07 seconds. So if we jump back to 383, our 0 to 100 is actually slower and our top speed is shorter. Let's keep going shorter for a second. Let's go to a 411. So our 0 to 100 time hasn't really changed, and our top speed has come down a bit. So I do want the car to accelerate a little bit better. So I'm going to take a gamble and go with the 394. But not looking at my 0 to 100 time, looking at my 0 to 60 time. So making a bit of a compromise here. Shaved off a couple mile an hour on the top speed. My 0 to 60 time is quicker, which means my exit speed out of the corner should be better. And it hasn't really affected my top speed at all because 6th is so tall. We'll talk about advanced tuning in the 4th section where we'll go in and change each of the gears individually, and you can see how much of a change that makes and some suggestions of what to do there. So let's talk about alignment. Now, this, as I mentioned in the article, is really dependent on where the car is mid-corner. So we shouldn't really change these numbers until we've brought up our telemetry to see how far positive the wheels are going in any given corner. But I do know that I need stability at high speed, so I want to give a little bit of toe, negative toe, to the rear wheels to keep them pointed inwards, which helps the car under braking, which helps the car under keeping the car stable under acceleration, etc. And it'll give us a little bit of extra turn-in going into a corner, and hopefully not too much oversteer. We're going to leave the caster alone for now. There's some suggestions in Black Magic according to caster as well. But our roll bars, this is where the car was set based on when we upgraded it. But the car has also been lightened by about 200 pounds. So we need to think in terms of spring rates here. Is the car too stiff? Is the car too soft? We're going to have to look at its pitch and roll when we're in the corners and kind of tune this as we go along. So spring rates right now, we're dead even. Front to back, that's kind of interesting. Normally on a rear-wheel drive car, you want the rear to be softer so that when it squats down, it doesn't cause the car to oversteer coming out of a corner. I like the fact that it already determined that the front end needed to be higher than the back. You do want to rake a rear-wheel drive so that under braking, when the car nosedives, the rear end will come up in proportion to the front and stay level, causing it to not lift throttle oversteer. So we're going to leave these numbers alone for now. We're going to check the spring rates to see where it's at. We want to make sure that the car isn't oversteering too much as we push it harder, especially when our tires begin to wear out, probably 4 to 5 laps into the race. Our dampening numbers, again, we need to look at how the spring is reacting using the telemetry. Bump stiffness is the same. This is pretty standard for aero, mid. As I mentioned, all the way left is pretty much full speed, and all the way right is full cornering. It will affect your top speed and acceleration numbers. I honestly suggest you just leave it in the middle, but if the car is doing something completely squirrely, make some changes. Is it pushing too much? Let me take away some aero. Do I need a little bit more rear grip? Let me add some aero to the rear. Our braking force. For me, I find that cars in Forza never stop enough, and the brake bias is usually completely off. Street cars, pretty much all cars use the front brakes more than the rear, so they should be proportioned to the front. I start with 55%. I will go up to 60%, but I will not go more than 70%. If not, the car will start to do some really odd stuff and cause the rear end to step out on you. So let's bring this back to 60% up front. And then because I'm running ABS, I like to boost the brakes so the car stops shorter. In this case, we're going to add about 15% additional braking power to the brakes, and that should help us stop a little bit quicker and deeper into the corners so we can go for later apexes and later braking zones. Okay, the differentials, it's all about wheel spin as you're taking off and how the car is slowing down going into a corner. So if you've got a Mercedes with big torque numbers, you really want to play with differentials. You want to get it to the point where the rear wheels aren't locking up so fast that it's spinning the tires all the time. So you're going to want to reduce that acceleration number. When you're working on getting the car to stop more quickly, you want more engine braking. You want to increase the deceleration number to the point at which the car begins to get loose on you under braking. It starts to kind of wag the tail a bit, and then you start to back off from that point. So we're going to leave these numbers alone and just play with the suspension for now to see how this does. So we're going to go into our test drive. Our setup has changed. Yet we're going to go ahead and take that. So now, because we're going to do some on-fly tuning, I'm not going to save my tune until I come back out of the tuning session. So we're going to take away all the drive tars because we want to be able to use telemetry and talk through this and do all the testing that we like without any interruption or having to deal with passing people, etc. So again, going back to Road Atlanta. Get Freak Show prepped. We don't want to do tuning on our outlap. We just want to get a feel for the car. And then on the seconds, thirds, fourths laps, we want to make our adjustments. And then as the tires begin to wear, we want to see how consistent the car is going to be. Because if you're in a long race with no pit stops, you need the car to put down consistent laps while the tires are orange. So let's go ahead. All right, let's bring up some telemetry. Let's look at these springs, see what they're doing mid-corner. So the way I've learned how to do this is you really want your numbers to be at 50 all the time. So if the car's under load, you want the springs to not have to jump to 60 and 70% of use. You want them to be at 50. That way you have more room to work within the upper and lower limits of the shop. So right now, it almost seems like don't have enough spring for the car. All right, now we need to check our camber numbers. So let's go to that menu and see where we're at. All right, so right now, car is level. Our numbers are confirming what we see in the tuning menu. We're at about a negative degree of camber in the front. All right, braking, pushing it in the corner. I'm trying to look at these numbers while I'm driving. Let's take a big corner to like 12 and see what it looks like. Saw a blip of positive there. Yeah, we're positive. So I would say we could add 0.2 of a degree negative in the front so that the wheel is staying closer to zero or just barely negative as we're turning. I saw a lot there, but that was a one wheel off. And let's take a look at the back. A little bit of oversteer. Try to look at the back. Yeah, the back's going positive a lot more in the corner. So I think we should take away some camber there as well. So let's go ahead and pause, and we'll go into our tuning menu, and we'll take care of a couple things while we're in here. All right, so I would say negative 1.2, and in the rear, I would add 2 as well, just to not to keep it balanced front to back, but because I want to see how it's going to affect the rear end. All right, we could take away spring rate or add sway bar. I'm of the opinion we need to take away a little bit of rear spring to make it softer in the back because I want the car to rotate. So I like to use even numbers. We're going to go with 700 pounds in the rear. And then we're going to make a big drastic change in the front. We're going to give it 800 pounds of spring in the front. And some of this is going to be dependent on your driving style. How do you like the car to act? Do you want it to oversteer a little bit in the corner? Do you want it to be extremely neutral? Sorry, I kind of overshot my number here. I'm trying to get as close to, all right, 800. Our ride height is good. Let's look at our dampers. Are our shocks stiff enough? So we're going to up these numbers, okay, especially in the front. I'm going to bump them up quite a bit. And then the bump stiffness, I'm going to leave that alone for now. And then I think I'm going to take away a little bit of sway bar. Let the shock do more work. And I'm going to take away a little bit of sway bar in the front as well and see where we end up. And the reason I'm doing that is I think the bars are too big for the weight of the car for what we reduced. All right, let's see what it does now. So changes are real time, which is nice. And we'll start to see different numbers as we're going into the corners. Not seeing any more negative, not hearing the tires screaming anymore. Alright, big turn 12. Good, I'm seeing negative while we're in the corner. I like that. The car feels better. More planted, barely any screaming, but that also could be a result of the changes we made to the shocks themselves. Let's take a look at that. Look at that. Pushing it in the corner, we're at 0.55 instead of 0.75. Let's see. A little bit more there. So we'll continue to work on that. The car feels so much better. So let's try to set up a clean lap here, see if the car is quicker than it was before, and how much of a change we made. I'm not going to get into all the little details that make this car perfect, because I do want to talk about advanced tuning in the next segment, but give you guys an idea that very minimal changes have big impacts on the car. So let's get set up here for a nice clean flying lap. Notice it started wagging the tail there going into that corner deep. That might be an indication that we need to play with that rear diff. Right on the edge of the track, right where we want to be. Coming down into 12. Lift a little and shift. And power out and across the line. So, oh, it didn't give me... Last lap, 137.5. What? How did we go slower? Maybe we need to rethink this tune. So sometimes, even though the car feels better, I don't think I'm making too many mistakes here. You can actually make the car go slower. Let's try one more time. Whoa, so all that tuning and we actually are going slower, 137s and 138s, than had we just left it alone. So that's something to consider as well, that the tuning doesn't actually make the car faster. It feels fantastic. It feels way better than it did. I'm not hearing the tires screaming at me. I'm not feeling the car pitch in the corners. I am wearing out the front tires more with that extra camber and the changes to the shocks and the sway bars. So why don't we reconsider our strategy here and try to leverage one of the tools that's available to help tune the cars and see how that affects this particular vehicle. We'll catch you in part 4. All right, so welcome back to part 4. We're going to talk about advanced tuning using a well-known Forza tuning app known as Forza Tune Pro. So one of the things we have to do, as we saw in the last section, making some of those tunes manually, a little bit of guesswork using telemetry, driving by feel, etc. The car feels better, acts better, but is it really at its potential? It looks like our lap times are a little bit slower than just adding mods and going out and driving the car. So why don't we recalibrate and reset here a little bit, and we're going to pull our base plus mods out so that we start fresh with no tune, and then we'll work with Forza Tune Pro to figure out where our optimal numbers will be. The one thing we do need to do, though, is collect some baseline information about the vehicle to be able to feed Forza Tune's interface, which I'll be showing kind of throughout the video. So up front, one of the things we're going to need is we have to actually go into the upgrade menu and pull some stats about the car's power and weight. So we know the car weighs 3,250 right now with the mods that we made. We have a 50-50 weight distribution. Our performance index is 600. It's rear wheel drive. Obviously the game is Forza 7, and the track is, we're going to select Road Atlanta because that's the one we're testing on. Now you can tune to individual tracks. That's a lot more work. Like I said in the article, you want to pick tracks like Brands Hatch, Road Atlanta, and VIR, because those have the most combinations of technical speed, elevation, off camber, etc. And if you can design a car that will run consistently at those 3 tracks, it'll pretty much run everywhere outside of like an oval or the drag strip or something super specific. Our tune type is standard, and we're going to include the gearing calculations as well, and that's where we're going to need a little bit more data about the vehicle itself. Now, the things that it asks you for with respect to the vehicle when you're doing the gearing is all about power band, and unfortunately this graph, as useful as it is, only gives you gross information instead of really the net information, and it's hard to determine where is the drop-off point for torque, where is peak horsepower, all of that kind of stuff. We have to actually look that up through the telemetry, which we're going to do in a second here. So let's go ahead and set up a test drive. And this, we don't need to worry about whether the tires are cold, whether what the track conditions are. We just need to grab information from the heads-up display, from that digital dashboard, the first panel in our telemetry. And so we're going to be looking for max torque, the RPM for max torque, which is where the torque number falls down, and we're looking for red line. And then we're going to grab some more information from our menu system to finalize the output numbers for our tune. So here we are back at Road Atlanta, just waiting for things to load up. Don't care if there's cars or otherwise, so we're going to go ahead and start. It really doesn't matter. We want to kick up that telemetry window. We're going to get into second or third gear so we can look at the torque numbers. Now I'm going to bounce off the rev limiter. Well, eventually. Woo! Drift, 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 cold tires. All right, let's try that again. First gear, second gear. I'm seeing 85, 70 as our red line. Now we need to look at our torque numbers, right? What's our maximum torque? I saw a flash of 254 there, 256. Let's let off, get back on it. Let's keep it in third gear. Our torque number is starting to drop off, which means our torque is lower than our RPM, or torque. 265 looks like our number. And it started to drop off at 267. And it started to drop off at right around 6,000 RPM. Let's double check that on the straightaway. So we are third gear. We can fudge these numbers plus or minus a pound-foot of torque. 269. And it started to, we're in third gear, going up the hill. 260. At 5,700 RPM. Let's call it that. Let's make it easy on ourselves. and we're going to plug those numbers into Forza Tune. So let's get out of our menu here. So we said 265 at 5,700 RPMs with a maximum red line of 8,600. We don't have any forced induction. We are a 6-speed, and we need to go back and collect some additional information about our setup. The first extra piece of information is how big are the back tires. That does play a role into how Forza calculates the gear ratios. So let's go into our upgrades menu, upgrade shop. Let's go into tires, which was something we didn't change. Changing the size of the rear tires does change the PI, as you can see. And we're not running the widest tires, and those are the fronts. Same thing for the rears. Changing the rears changes the PI. So we're at a 255, 35, 19. All right. Now, the other thing we're going to need, we have to get from the power menu. So it doesn't matter which one you choose. We're going to hit toggle until we get all of our theoretical, dyno numbers here, our drag racing numbers. What is the 0 to 100 time of this setup? So 0 to 100 is 11.093, and our simulated top speed currently is 168.0. We're going to go ahead and feed that into Forza Tune Pro. It's going to give us a bunch of numbers in return. According to Forza Tune, here's where we need to be. We're going to walk through these panels one at a time. So it's saying 28.5 for our tire pressure, so a pound over what I had selected. Now the gearing here is specific to the race transmission. So let's go back and see if we can switch to the race trans without changing any of the numbers, the performance numbers of the vehicle. So we're going to go into this, go to here. So we're at sport, we're at 602, but that gives me individual gearing changes. So we're going to go ahead and purchase it, and then we're going to try to take something away. Maybe we can take away the clutch. That I'm okay with. All we're changing here is the shifting time. I don't believe we are changing the weight of the vehicle, so I'm going to go back and check that. We're at 3261. Okay, I'm going to make my modifications to my chart then, 3261. And I'm going to leave everything else alone because my RPM shouldn't have changed, nothing else should change. This really affects weight and shift time. So we're still at B600. We're going to go ahead and tune it again. So now you'll notice my gearing has completely opened up. So according to Forza Tune, I need to change my gearing to 367, so just slightly over stock. And my first gear needs to be 386, so we're making first gear a lot shorter. So 386. We're bumping second gear up to 255. I overshot it there a little bit. 255, there we are. Now we're going to 190 for third gear. We're going to go to 152 for fourth. So we're making all the gears shorter. Going to 126 for fifth. And we're going to 108 for sixth gear, which good chance, unless we're at Road America or Le Mans, we're probably not going to use sixth gear on some of the smaller tracks. So our new simulated numbers, we got a 4.4 second 0 to 60 time, 11.006 0 to 100 time, and our top speed has only dropped 2 miles an hour from stock. So we'll have to see how this changes the performance of the car. So you can see where the arrows are is where we started. We've shortened up all the gears. We've lengthened the final drive, so there's obviously a ratio there between the gears themselves and the final drive, and we'll see how the car performs. Alignment-wise, it's telling us negative 1.8 for front camber, negative 1.1 for rear camber, wants us to use no toe front and rear, and it wants us to boost the caster, making the front wheels move further forward by 0.7 degrees, so about 3/4 of a degree forward. That's going to lengthen the wheelbase slightly. It's also going to change the way the car handles at high speed and a turn-in. So our anti-roll bars, it's telling us, or our sway bars, it wants us to make them way lighter than they are. It wants us to drop them down to 18.7 and 17.5. A lot more drastic than what I was looking at, but then again, it was just, you know, some high-level tuning that we were doing. It also wants us to drop our spring rates way down to 529 pounds in the front. Scroll forever here. 529.1 right on the nose, and 573.2 for the rear. So slightly heavier springs in the back. 73.2, and our ride height needs to be set to medium for both the front and the rear. And so Forza Tune doesn't do a good job of telling you what those numbers are. It pretty much just gives you a graph and says, okay, shoot for the middle. So I'm gonna set it the same way it has it. Best of my ability here, I'm gonna try to line these up. So that to me looks similar to the graph that's in the Forza Tune menu. Over to dampening, we're going to make that 6.9. We're going to bump up the rears to 7.3. We're going to change the bump stiffness to much softer to 4.3 and 4.4 respectively. It says to leave the aero at medium, so we're going to leave it alone, exactly where we had it. Like again, it's kind of on or off in most cases when you're messing with aero. It says our braking balance, it wants it at 56% with no boost. So I'm going to leave it at 100% instead of messing with it the way we had it. And now it's telling me to change the differentials, kind of take away some lockup and take away some lockup, which will hopefully get rid of that squirreliness that we saw under braking. So there we have it, 60% and 30%. So let's go ahead and save this setup. Apply and save, and we're going to go ahead and save it as a third tune. You don't need to buy 3 cars, you just need to have 3 tunes. So we're going to save this as Forza Tune Pro. If I could type it, it's even better. So Forza Tune Pro. And I think the big difference here is I'm not doing the long division or mental gymnastics to figure out what the gear ratios are, what the gearing should be. So why don't we go ahead and set ourselves up for another test drive. I want to make sure this time, though, that when we do this, we don't have 23 drivatars out there. We want to go out on a clean track and really see what this new setup can do for us, provided by Forza Tune Pro. All right, let's take a peek. Let's get these tires warmed up and see if we can go faster than a 136 with this new setup. We're staying within a half a degree of negative under turning. That's not too bad. All right, let's get ready for a hot lap here and see where we're at with this car. Late braking, tucking it in. Get close to that apex. Coming up the hill, turn 2. Quick stab of the brakes. It does not like that corner. Oh, that's terrible. Come on. It's doing pretty good down the straightaway. I think we're carrying more speed into turn 10 than before. Now we can verify that by going back to the other videos. Alright, flying lap. We're still at a 137. Let's see if we can go faster. Lift a little here, let it nose in, keep us on track. Power out, use all the track. To me it feels a little boggy in third, like it just kind of sits there. Whatever time we gained, we just lost it. We were half a second up. Now we're only 0.02 of a second up from the previous lap. Up 10 a little bit. My apologies. All right, let's try one more time. So interestingly enough, all that voodoo and magic and everything else is brought us right back to where we were by just throwing mods on the car. So it makes me wonder if there really isn't much that we could tune out of this car to make it go that much faster without adding a ton more horsepower. So thought about it, why don't we go in and try to see if we can do some performance power upgrades to this car and see what kind of lap times that brings versus everything extremely suspension heavy like we were doing earlier. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to reset to our base tune. So we're going to do our load here, go to my tune. So we got our base plus mods. So no changes. This car is bone stock from the way we started with outside of our mods. We're going to go in and change our upgrades real quick. Give Forza a second to catch up. Go to the upgrade shop. So one of the things we noted earlier was that tires were a big deal. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to change to the sport tire compound, which drops our PI to 577. Now, Like I mentioned in the article, superchargers are your best friend. So why don't we put a supercharger on this? It takes us to A604, and then we'll work backwards to get us to B600 from there. So let's throw this on there. That's 50 extra horsepower, pushing us to near 400 horsepower. All right, step back from that. Let's go look at our other mods that we have. Maybe we can take away, all right, we already took away the flywheel. We didn't do anything with any of those parts. Let's go to our valve train. Let's take away, let's go back to standard valving. And let's see what else we can do. Can we put a set of cams in this thing? Nope. Can we put an intercooler in it? Let's see. Oh, 602. So we make the car 6 horsepower more for an extra 40 pounds. It doesn't feel like we really need it. Maybe we can gain the horsepower somewhere else, like in the ignition system. 604, too high. Let's go with, nope, can't do that either. So let's see if we can make a mod elsewhere, like reducing some of the weight of the car, going back into our cage in here. So we can drop the PI by adding a ton of weight, but we don't want to do that by adding the cage. So here we are. We can go a little further. Nope, 615. Or what else we could do to this car to help us out? Could we go with a wider tire? There's an option. Let's try that. Let's go with wider rear tires, 598, B600, so 275 in the rear. Pretty normal for these cars, but let's just see. If we do a 265 rear, can we widen the front? Do we want to run square? We're currently at a 225 in the front. Can't go much bigger than that. Puts us well over the mark. So let's go with a even beefier rear. 275 rear. Try to get some extra grip out of the back of the car. All right. So let's take a look at our tune real quick. See where we're at. Tune. Tire pressure, we're leaving the gearing alone. We're going to leave the car totally stock based on what Forza recommended. I'm not going to do any tuning outside of that. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Setup manager, save our setup. We're going to call this one Freak Show Supercharge. Freak Show-SC. All right. Let's go ahead and do a test drive. I'd like to, oh, sorry about that. Yes. And let's make sure we have no drive tars because we want a nice clean lap. And we want to see what kind of power we're putting down, etc. So all we've done at this point is basically thrown a supercharger on this car, bumped the horsepower up, slightly stickier tires, talking the equivalent to a high-performance summer tire on the street. We got aero pack, we got adjustable suspension, coilovers, sway bars, all that kind of fun stuff. Haven't done any other mods, and let's see what and a little bit of lightness, but let's see what the car gives us. All right, let's go. Got to get these tires warmed up. Now we're targeting a 136 or better. Let's see if the supercharger gets us there. Come on. Up through turn 1. we are back down the back straightaway. Almost 50 into the braking zone. Down out of 12. Now 136, tying our original configuration with the slightly lighter and stickier tires, and we've added 50 horsepower. I mean, so sometimes a lot of this stuff is a compromise. Yeah, I like the extra boost from the turbo or whatever, but does it really make a difference? It comes down to power to weight ratio, gearing, and grip at the end of the day. A lot of these other changes, they just really don't matter. So this car is a special snowflake in the sense that, again, it doesn't have a lot of wiggle room in terms of making adjustments like a lower PI car would have, but it's still kind of fun to try and see how much we can really squeeze out of the car and tailor it to a specific driving style. So I know that this probably wasn't the expected outcome. You were hoping to log in and see some revelations about how to tune an E46 M3, how to make spectacular cars from nothing. But you know, it's all really dependent upon the car you choose, your driving style, and a lot of other variables. But if you're having fun doing it, then keep at it. If tuning's not for you, there's a lot of other options out there. But understand that, you know, Forza does a pretty good job of doing balance of power. You know, you spend a lot of time tuning. Is it worth it? Well, yes, depending on the car. Is it worth it for others? Probably not. But when you're building to a spec, that's the most important part. When you're building to a spec, when you hit that upper limit, unless you built something absolutely outrageous, like a 700 horsepower Vandura van, I'm going just a little bit faster now, you know, you're going to be able to keep up, right? But you also want to be able to target lap times. And some of those leaderboard times out there are absolutely just outrageous. So look at what your buddies are doing. If you're close, if you're within a second, a half a second, it's respectable. So build the car to be competitive, you know. Leading the race isn't fun. And, you know, being at the back of the pack isn't fun either. You know, leading the race is a lot of pressure to stay fast and to stay consistent. But mixing it up in the top 5 or even in the middle, those are some of the best and most memorable races that you'll ever have. So, you know, again, it all depends on what you want to do and what you want your racing experience to be like. So give tuning a try, don't. Either way, have fun out there.